Hi, my name is Chantal Torres. I just wanted to say a couple of prayers. Recently lost my mother in 2017. It was one of the hardest things that I ever have done in life. And I think ever since that day, I kind of stopped believing. But my marriage is falling apart, and I just need to pray for it.
Boy, you hear a bunch of stuff. Chantel, thank you for sharing that with us on our comment line. Death of a mom, lack maybe of saying, hey, I'm going to trust God through this, losing your faith, and then your marriage. Boy, there's a lot going on. That is the setup for grief in your life, and we're going to help you and others today on Intentional Living. And I do want to welcome our Facebook Live friends joining us from around the world. You're welcome to join in as well. If you want to post a question, we'll try to get to that. Or you can call us at 888-888-1717 coming into the studio here as we talk about grief. Coming up in just a little bit, someone that I've not met, but I've heard his story, Mark Negley, who's the author of a book of his own story. Think about it. Diagnosed with cancer. Some of you relate to that. You've been through it with your health. And God heals him, thinking, hey, we're back on course, life is good, and then boom, a suicide in the family. And he's going to be joining us a little bit later. And I want to introduce Bobbie Rill, who's right here next to me. And Bobbie, we worked together for a lot of years.
Yes, we did, and it was my pleasure.
Yeah, Bobbie was involved in our counseling ministry. We had over 50 counselors on staff, and she helped out with our Intentional Living conferences, and now has a whole ministry specializing in grief and grief recovery. And we invited her to come and join us here today. So Facebook friends, as well as radio audience, here's what we'd like to know. How have you dealt with grief? What's one thing that's working for you that God's showing you through this time? 888-888-1717 is the number, 888-888-1717. All right, Bobbie, you do this constantly. You're helping people with grief.
I am. And you know the reason? Is because as a counselor, Randy, I began to realize and see that loss was just about at the core issue of every person I was seeing in counseling.
Yeah.
And I thought I needed to really hone my skills in that.
What's different with this COVID thing in terms of grief? Is there anything you're seeing that's different than maybe a couple years ago?
Yes. I really think that COVID and the pandemic that we've been through has really increased the awareness of people on what is grief. Because normally we would think that death and divorce, those are the two main topics that everyone thinks of related to grief. But with the pandemic, we've had much more awareness now that grief is so much broader than grief of death of a loved one or family member, and also divorce.
So what are you seeing? I know you say that it's really conflicting feelings going on. What is different? What are some of the experiences of people you're dealing with and helping? What are people feeling with grief today?
Yes, a whole gamut of different emotions, Randy. First of all, when we talk about the conflicting feelings, I think of a loved one who's died after a long-term illness. And there is that experience of relief that the person is glad that they're no longer suffering. And also maybe some gladness in there that they don't have to perform maybe a procedure that their loved one wanted them to do. Yeah. I've run across that a number of times. But then there's also this deep sadness and loss and confusion and wondering, can I live without this person in my life? And so they feel overwhelmed and confused, and there's fear of the future and fear of that unknown. And I have really seen an increase in depressed moods and anxiety and fear. That's the main thing that I have noticed with the pandemic is fear.
You know, in my own life, I mean, things have been going well. God is blessing. Don and I are doing okay. We've stayed away from this virus, and our family is intact. Things are, moving along, and yet I can even be aware of the fact that everything's changed. The world's different. My schedule's different. What we do on the radio is different. I had to do remote things. My conferences we had scheduled. We can't do those, and there's just kind of that low level feeling of sadness. Are you seeing that? Just kind of as opposed to people just in deep grief. Yes. There's a feeling of just kind of stuckness in their life.
Yes, one of the definitions that we use for grief is that it is the conflicting feelings that a person can experience with the end of or change in any familiar pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
So when you think of that end, boy, we had to stop and work from home, or we had to stop all of our natural routines, and especially the connection that we had at church or families gatherings and friends, and the kids are home from school. And so now parents have been under this kind of stress, trying to work from home with all those changes and yet have their kids home as well. So great deal of change, and the confusion that's gone around that has been incredible during the pandemic.
Grief specialist Bobbie Rill is joining me here today live, and coming up in just a few moments, Mark Negley, who's written a really fascinating book, his own story. Talk about grief. We'll get to that in a moment as well. Love to have you join us. Maybe you have a question for Bobbie. Maybe you have one thing that's helped you during times of grief that you'd like to share. 888-888-1717 is the number. 888-888-1717. Expectations. I'm wondering how people are viewing the expectations. The world is going to be reopening. Our numbers are starting to drop with COVID. Life's going to get back to normal. And yet the world isn't the same. What do you think is going to happen? Is this going to just take us out of this grief cycle, or do we have a whole new set of issues coming up, do you think, Bobbie?
Well, I do think that we have some new issues coming up, because there's been the loss of those hopes, dreams, and expectations. And those that have been, had a child and their spouse couldn't come in for the birth, and the expectation of having their wedding, and that was all canceled. But I also think you're absolutely right, Randy, with regards to the expectations now. People are looking forward to a brighter day, and yet some are still living in that fear that we talked about. And so, it depends on the individual and the tools and the skills that they have to cope successfully and effectively.
So give me one or two things that people can do today if they're feeling this grief cycle in their life, and they don't know if it's depression or is it grief, or, how do we separate all that? And what's one thing or two things they could be doing?
Oh, gosh, Randy, there's so many good things that they can be doing. First of all, I want them to know that they're not going crazy. You're not going crazy, and it's probably not depression. It's a depressed mood, just like you said, but they feel depressed. And one of the best things you can do is be very intentional with regards to what you're allowing to entertain in your mind, because it is the mind that creates that fear and that anxiety. And yet, if you focus on God's promises and His Word and the other things, so that's watch what you're thinking about. The other thing is make sure that you're talking to loved one and being honest with what's going on inside. We need to talk about the changes, and we need to talk about the reality of what we're feeling and not stuff it. So that's my encouraging words of a couple of things that you can really do that'll help.
All right. Well, I know, Bobbie, got a lot more coming up. We're going to get to some more practical things. Love to have you join in. One thing that you've learned, maybe it's been helpful for you, or a question that you'd like to ask, 888-888-1717. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, Mark Negley is going to tell us how God healed him from cancer. And, and then you think, hey, God's healed me. Life's good. Everything's back on track. But that's not the end of the story. The loss of his wife to suicide. Grief. And we thought, boy, he has something to share with us. It'll be encouraging. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment, as well as your calls. 888-888-1717 is the number. Stay tuned. We got a lot more coming your way.
This is Intentional Living with your host, Dr. Randy Carlson. Intentional Living is furnished by Parent Talk Incorporated and is made possible by the generous support of our listeners. This program is not a substitute for professional counseling, medical, financial, or legal advice. Intentional Living is not intended to be therapy by radio. We are Intentional Living, and we'll be right back.
Here's one thing to deal with unmet expectations in marriage. Hi, I'm Dr. Randy Carlson with an Intentional Living Minute. The key is to hold realistic expectations. Anytime expectations are greater than reality, disappointment will be the result. Mathematically, I say it's expectations greater than reality equal disappointment, disillusionment, and discouragement in your relationship. So keep your expectations realistic. Now, maybe you can't change reality, but you know what? You can change your expectations. The scripture says, always continue to fear the Lord. You will be rewarded for this. Your hope will not be disappointed. See, we can be disappointed in people and disappointed in ourselves, but our expectations of God, when they're realistic, are never disappointed. So today, have realistic expectations for your marriage and your spouse, and that's intentional living.
Visit us at theintentionallife.com.
Today, we're talking about grief and loss and recovery from grief and loss. So you can join us on Facebook Live, on the radio live, online around the world live. And you can call 888-888-1717 or leave a Facebook question. Kim did. We'll get to that in a moment, as well as calls coming in at 888-888-1717. Boy, we got this is one of those days I wish we had about 3 hours of radio, not just a half hour. Mark Negley is on the line with us. He's written a book called Survive, Alive, Thrive, which is also not a book title only, but a ministry he started, and fascinating story. And Mark's nice to meet you on the phone today. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Great to hear you.
I was sharing with the audience, God touched you, healed you from cancer, but we think, wow, that's a great story, but that's not the end of the story. Tell us briefly what your story is as we're thinking about grief today.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. I think to set the table, I came to know Christ later in my life, in my 30s, and there's some expectation that when you follow Christ and you have the eternal promise that he provides, that life is going to be good and you won't bump into hard stuff. And as we know, that's not the way life really works. So, in my case, I've, had some wonderful blessings and tremendous success in my life. But in 2015, as you point out, I got the call from the doctor after a biopsy and said, listen, there's no easy way to tell you this. You have cancer, and it's pretty significant. May metastasize. We need to move forward with a variety of chemo and other related options. And in the middle of the night, I was awakened by God's voice. And as incredible as that sounds, God woke me and said, you will be healed, and then I will reveal your commission. So I sat up from bed, and again, he said it again, you'll be healed, and then I'll reveal your commission. It led me to read the book of Acts, which I had this not completely understandable desire to do. So I sat down and got to chapter 20, verse 23, when Paul is about to return to Jerusalem and he's being warned not to go. And he says, even though I know that hardship and even prison may await me, my life means nothing. The only thing that matters is to testify to the grace of God through Christ. So I thought, okay, I think I understand. I'm in. I'm on board with that idea. You'll heal my cancer, and I'll testify to your grace. And miraculously, 7 months later, after refusing treatment, to the doctor's astonishment, I went in for a follow-up 7-month visit, and the cancer was inexplicably gone. And it was one of those moments of great prayer and celebration. And I was involved in some men ministry at the time and started sharing the story. And I thought, boy, how great is this, that God stands with me, heals me from cancer, and inspires me to help others going through that same journey. And as you pointed out, that wasn't the end of the story, because 6 months later, my wife, who had been in a terrible car accident, was struggling with depression following neurological and chronic ongoing pain, succumbed to her pain and her emotional depression, and to the heartbreaking, traumatic extent that you can imagine, took her life, leaving at the time my 18-year-old son and I to pick up the pieces. And at that point, again, God showed up, and as he showed up and provided me with a way and a direction to get through this, that he was greater than any adversity that we could possibly go through. The message was amazing, right? Number one, he's with you in supernatural ways when he chooses to intervene and heal you and do things that can only be explained as miracles. And he also walks with you through the valley when things are darkest, so you can count on it at all times. And that's been my life experience in a nutshell.
Well, I know that God did reveal to you also a passion. I know you even have a ministry that is helping others go through grief and what's going on in their lives. Briefly, what is it you're doing now? How did this change your life in terms of how you're living your life today?
Well, to follow that Acts verse in 20, where it says that my life is now committed to testifying to the grace of God, you take that seriously when God articulates that for you in what I consider to be in my experience, was such a clear-cut case. So I've spent the last 5 years, my wife passed in 2016, interviewing hundreds of people, running grief groups and support groups around the country, and I'm speaking on this topic. And, I discovered that, there is this deep need for people to understand their grief journey from an experiential standpoint, from the perspective of those of us who have been through it. And, while it's enormously helpful for doctors and psychologists and pastors to provide support and insight, and therapists to provide support, all of that's very important. But it starts for us knowing where we are on the journey and understanding that we're not alone, that even though our particular loss event and the depression and the other challenges that we face in our life, as you were talking about earlier about COVID, these are unique to each of us, right?
Yes.
And yet at the same time, there's commonalities. And when you know you're not alone and you're able to navigate and to identify where you are, it helps release the anxiety and uncertainty, and you can pursue a path towards healing. And here I am today, 5 years later, living a joy-filled life, grateful every morning that I wake up, despite
Amen.
the fact that some of the really super tough experiences that, you can only imagine are woven into the fabric of my life. God is still with me and giving me the inspiration to help others and comfort others, that basically the stories of no matter what you're going through, I promise you, if I can get here, you can too. And we're here to help.
Amen. Hey, Mark, thank you, man. Nice to meet you on the air. We'll have to have you back another time to share more of that story. But God bless you and stay on that journey, okay, my friend?
Hey, it's my privilege. Thank you so much for having me, and God bless you and all your listeners.
Thank you. And let me point out that if you want to read the rest of his story, he's got a new book just released. We got it here. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to reading it. Just got it. Survive, Alive, Thrive. And by the way, if you come to our highlights page at our website, theintentionallife.com, we have more information there about Mark, but also about Bobbie and what Bobbie's doing in her ministry of helping people in grief. You're welcome to join us. We got calls we'll get to as well, 888-888-1717. I want you to comment, though, Bobbie, before we move on. You heard Mark's story.
Yes.
And what I heard was, here's a man who could have gotten stuck, could have gotten in the ditch, could have turned on God. Everything could have gone south. And obviously, this is a horrendous, difficult life. But he chose to turn something and use this in a positive way in his own life. Some people are equipped to do that more than others. Yeah. But what did you hear that you'd want to comment on from Mark's story?
One of the there was a number of things that Mark said that I was so glad to hear. One is he talked about the uniqueness of each individual in their grief that they go through in their journey. It is unique, but that connection with other people, we need to really connect and have that support with other people. One of the things that I've seen is that that's a big thing we've lost in the COVID pandemic, is that connection with others. And so we need that support of others. But, as he was telling his story, I was thinking of Psalms 147, verse 3. And this is the real crux of the matter of what I got from Mark said. There is healing, and we can move forward. And Psalms 147:3 says that He, God, heals the brokenhearted, and He binds up their wounds. And I say this because I want you to know that there is healing. And I say that, too, because so many messages out there might be that you will never get over the death of a loved one, or you'll never get over the death of a child. But I want to tell you that God heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. And just like Mark is doing, he's using those things for good. Now, if you're in the throes of grief, you may not want to hear that, because I know you may think that there's no good thing that can come out of a death of a child or loss of a job and income for the family. But it's as you bow before God, too, and really look for his healing. He is there. He's promised he'll never leave us, right, Randy?
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
All right, we've got calls and questions we're going to get to in just a moment. Time is passing. We're talking about the power of grief, but the power of God is even greater. We're live here on Facebook, on the radio as well. I want to say thanks to our members, those of you, men and women, couples, businesses, people from around the country who are supporting the ministry, allow us to do this every day. And this month, the teaching is on the topic of today counts. You know, we only have today. We have no guarantee tomorrow. We don't know what tomorrow's going to be. We can't be intentional in yesterday. And I just did a teaching, in fact, that'll be coming out later this month. And it's on the top 10 things from the past that are impacting you today. How does your past, and that's really kind of what we're talking about in some ways, some of the regrets and losses and griefs of the past, how they impact your life today. And that's the teaching. And so watch for that, members. New members, those of you joining us today, we'll get that to you, as well as we have a men's devotional, 90-day men's devotional, Strength and Solitude. We're giving it during Mother's Day month because we want to get it to you so you can give it to that man in your life in June coming up. So as you increase your support or join us in monthly support or share your best gift, we'll get this to you. Again, just go to theintentionallife.com. That's theintentionallife.com. And you can click on the donate button there. Let's get a couple calls on before we run out of time. We go to Sally, who's on the line in Arizona. Hi, Sally. Welcome to the show today. How are you? Hello. Are you there? All right. I guess not. Let's go to Jeannie, who's in Florida. Jeannie, how are you today?
Hello. I guess mine is kind of a strange situation. I'm a widow. I've been a widow 48 years. And I had a little dog that was for 13 and a half years. And, I mean, she was my constant companion. You know, I still work. I'm 84, but I still work. And but that little dog developed diabetes and died. And I would have never dreamed an animal loss would have hurt me like this has.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's been so hard.
How long has that been, Jeannie? How long ago did your dog die?
March the 5th, she died.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, I feel so silly because, you know, it's an animal. But her little spirit was so with me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, it seems strange to me that I could let something, a little animal.
It isn't strange, and Bobbie's shaking her head. It isn't strange, and we know people who
it's not.
They're really connected. Talk about that.
Well,
the grief comes in different sizes. And
thank you, Jeannie, for calling in, because there are so many out there that don't understand that our pets become a member of our family. And when we lose them, we grieve the death of our pets. We really do. So thank you for bringing that up. On the side of grief, that is exactly what you're doing. And please don't think you're silly, because it's very normal, very natural. You love that pet, and it was a family member and very close. But you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't understand it. They'll say, well, that was just a dog, or that was just a cat. And I'm here to tell you they're family members, and we grieve them. My husband, we had 3 dogs. We had to put them all 3 down within a period of 2 years. And my husband wrote an article saying goodbye to a good friend. And you might enjoy that on our website, because Maggie was Black Lab that we loved and lost. And so we grieve that. He
No,
wrote,
we
he wrote a
grieve.
letter.
We can grieve, people. Obviously, loss of people. It could be a loss of a marriage, children moving away, going to college.
Yes.
Loss of freedom.
Yes.
So losses come in a lot of different sizes and shapes, don't they?
Oh, they do. It's so broad, Randy. And we talked about, the loss of a job or loss of finances, loss of safety. Sometimes people don't understand the intangible losses, too, that we experience, like trust.
Yeah.
And that betrayal in a relationship is a loss that we grieve.
It is. You know what, Bobbie? We've got callers, and we run out of time.
Oh, my.
We're done. But we've only begun. I think in terms of help, if you'd like to know more about grief, if you want to check out what Bobbie does in her ministry, I think you probably have some helpful resources on your website.
We do. thegriefandwellnessgroup.com.
Yeah. And if you check here, we'll make sure we link it up.
Okay.
Or if you want to find out more about Mark Negley and his story, just come on over to theintentionallife.com. And when you do, you'll go to the broadcast highlights section. It'll all be there for you. By the way, today, God is with you. We all experience loss in life. There's no way of getting through life without loss. There's no way of getting through, I think, even some days without a feeling of grief and loss. And I want to say to those of us who maybe deny that we're going through grief or loss because it's not a big thing, just like we heard, maybe it was a cat or dog, or maybe even something as thinking about, I lost my job. Well, that's a loss, and that can create grief. Loss of freedom, loss of health, many different areas. But God is with you, and we only scratched the surface on the power of this discussion today, and I hope it's been helpful to you. If you missed any part of today's program, would like to hear it again, all you have to do is come over to our brand new website at theintentionallife.com. And you can hear the program again, stream it there, or wherever you find your podcasts, we're there for you, wherever that may be. All you have to do is put into the search bar either Intentional Living or my name, Randy Carlson, and it'll pop up for you so you can hear the program again. Bobbie, I thought we'd get further along, but I think we got people thinking, and that was the key. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And being part of the show. Bobbie Rill has been my guest. And again, thank you for the great work of Rob and for Stephen and for Derek, making sure we're up on Facebook here today. Thanks for being a part of the show. I'm Dr. Randy Carlson. Thank you for helping out with the ministry and your prayer and support. And you know what? We'll see you next time right here from the Intentional Living Center. Have a great day.
Hi, Bobbie.
Hey, Sally. How can I help you today?
Hi. Well, let me ask you a question. Were you connected with Highland Park Baptist Church in Southfield years ago?
Wow, that was years and years and years ago, but maybe that makes me sound old. Yes, actually, my sister and brother-in-law were on staff at Highland Park, and so I was there quite often.
Okay, very good. I'm sure you were the same person. I just wanted to make a comment on grief. I lost my husband. It'll be a year on May 13th. And I think what got me through is the fact that I believe that nothing happens to me that hasn't first gone through God, and He's approved it for His glory. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I can be sad, I can feel that. And one day I was sitting at the table, and it was like the Lord said to me, "Hey, girl, we've got this. We've been through this before. I'll be with you." And I could just hear Him saying that. Mm. And then I opened my Bible, and I was reading the story of where David lost his son to Bathsheba. And he had grieved, and he wouldn't eat, and he's sitting there crying. And all the servants were concerned about him. And then when he died, he got up and got washed and went out and was ready to eat. And they said, how can this be? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I grieved, hoping that God would let him live. But God chose to take him. And I know that he can't come to me, but someday I will go to him. And it was like, yes. Wow. Yes. That just really touched my heart.
And Sally, that's actually an example of what we call anticipatory grief that David was going through. And we do that if we, especially, even if you've gotten a family member with a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, we will go through that anticipatory grief. And sometimes God does heal. But even if he doesn't heal the one who is dying, he heals the brokenhearted, and we know that. Psalms tells us that. Yeah, so thank you, Sally. We really appreciate the connection today. Thank you. And I think we have some other callers. Okay, Jamie in Michigan.
Yes, hi, Bobbie. How are you?
I am doing fine, thank you.
Good. I enjoyed your program earlier this afternoon. I felt the Lord leading me to call you because I'm in the stages of grief now. I lost my husband 7 months ago, and it was a long 21-month journey. And I think in all of my grieving, the stage I'm at now is God's been telling me over and over here the last month or so to stay in the present day and to be in his presence. And, I used to go back all the time. What did I miss? What did I do enough with my husband's therapies? What could I have done better? And we can't do that. We can't do that. Yesterday's gone. It's over. Today's here. So we grab onto it. We thank God for it. We heal from it, and because of it, and because of our faith in God. And that's what's helped keep me strong. So that's kind of wrapped up into a long 21-month journey
yes.
with my husband. But
bless your heart. Not an easy journey, is it?
No.
And staying in the present moment is so important, just like you said. And that's part of when we go through our grief journey, that's really what we need to do. And sometimes that's where the challenge is. We have a tendency to kind of go back and look at all of the things that we wish we would have done better, or all the things that we wish we would have done different or more for that loved one. And the truth of the matter is sometimes we look at that at things we feel guilty about. I didn't hear you say that, and I was kind of glad that you didn't say you feel guilty about those things. Because honestly, I want to make a distinction about guilt. I actually had an attorney in one of my classes one time when I was teaching on grief, and I asked that attorney, I want to know, in a court of law, when a judge puts down that gavel and pronounces someone guilty, what does that mean? And you know what the attorney told me? He said it means one word, and that word means intent. Intent to do harm. So if there are people out there and you're feeling guilty over things in the past, let me encourage you to change that word guilt, because it probably wasn't any intent on your part to do harm, but rather change that word to regret. That's just being a whole lot nicer to ourselves and not beating ourselves up on that. And then actually, too, as you go through your grief journeys, I do want you to know there is healing, and there is help out there, that programs that really do help you walk through that relationship and then come out on the other end. And so there's a lot of hope out there for you. Yes. Yes, Kim has a question here or a comment regarding her husband left the family for an adulterous affair after 20 years, and divorce is underway. It sounds like that's currently going on right now, even though I believe God can heal our marriage. But it takes two to want it. Yes, it does. Plus, my mom passed away a year ago suddenly. And lastly, 2 of my children are prodigals. This past 18 months have me identifying with Job. Boy, I guess so, Kim. That's accumulation of grief. And that's one of the things that we do say is that grief is accumulative, and it's accumulatively negative. It will affect your whole life, your relationships, and it'll affect your health. And so this is where you do want to kind of get help for that. And Kim, she's so right. It takes 2 to make a marriage work. It only takes 1 to break it up. And that abandonment, that I don't know if it was sudden or if this was something that she knew about ahead of time, but want to tell you that is something alone that you'll grieve, and it takes two to want to make it work. So thank you, Kim, for what you shared and the journey that you are going through. Boy, can we not identify with Job in this kind of situation. So God bless you. In the midst of yours, I do encourage you to seek some help that will kind of help you put together this, because the accumulation of all the emotions that go with this. One of the things I think we need to understand is that it is not a sign of weakness to ask for help. And I don't know if any of you saw the little cartoon with Piglet and Pooh, and the picture is them walking with, and all we see is their back. And Piglet asks Pooh, says, "Pooh, what is the brightest and bravest word you have ever used?" And Pooh's response is, "Help." And sometimes we really need to recognize that there is help. And the tendency when we're going through this type of complicated grief and the accumulation of grief is to isolate. And so let me encourage you not to isolate out there, but to rather seek help and connection with friends and family and talk about your grief. There's another one we've got here too from Mary. And Mary says, "Keep trusting God. The devil is busy whispering into the ears of many of our loved ones. Pray for their souls and for Jesus to help you forgive." Forgiveness is one of the main keys and components to grief recovery. When we have the opportunity, and we do all the time, I've walked thousands of people through our grief recovery program and process. It's not easy, but one of the key components is recognizing the need to forgive. And I think of Matthew chapter 18. Boy, remember, he commands us to forgive. And when we have to look at forgiveness, I think he commands us, I do believe that it's for our own good. Because if we don't choose to forgive those who have hurt us, that's like hanging on to the pain. And let me tell you, pain does not really honor God if it's through an unforgiving heart. So let me encourage you to choose to forgive and work on that forgiveness. Find out what it really is, and make sure that you're making that decision to forgive. Oh, this is one thing that people get so confused about. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, okay? They think because I'm still angry or I'm still hurt that I'm not ready to forgive. And that's like putting the cart before the horse. What you want to do is make the decision to forgive, and then the anger, the hurt, the pain will dissipate. So we want to understand that forgiveness is a decision. It's a decision you make at a point in time. And also, forgiveness is also a process, and that you're going to need to make that decision a number of times. But I've been challenging people for 30-some years that you will know when your process of forgiveness is complete. So don't give up. And can I tell them when that process of forgiveness is going to be complete? It's when the memories, it's when the triggers no longer have the emotional impact on you. And I want to tell you, that is victory. That is the freedom that we have in Christ. Please don't forget to forgive.
That's so good to hear, because I think sometimes people don't realize that. They're asking, have I forgiven? I don't know if I've forgiven. And they're praying about it. And I think you just gave the clue that if those emotions come rushing back, you're probably not quite past it.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that when something triggers a memory or a song or a place triggers the hurt and the pain, we think, oh, it didn't work. I haven't forgiven, but that's not the truth. The truth is that it's a decision, but it's also a process in that we have to make that decision multiple times before it's complete. But you'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I believe, by personal experience.
Wow, because you mentioned music, Bobbie, because music is a powerful thing. And I know for me, that's where sometimes I had a friend who told me one time, don't listen to that song. It'll ruin it for you forever if you keep listening to it, because you associate it with that.
Yes. Yes.
Great.
I don't know how much time we can take, Rob.
No, we can take as long as you like.
You got to tell me, this. But when you talk about grief and whatever is going on there, the death of a child is such a hard one. And people believe that they'll never get over the death of a child. And it is a pain that is unique because it's so outside the normal routine of life. We don't expect a child to die before we do. And yet it happens at times. And there again, it's coming to God and understanding that pain and trusting Him to be the healer of your soul and begin to really look at working through that grief, choosing sometimes even to forgive, because I think parents kind of look at, I should have known, or if I'd only done this or done that. And I just want to encourage you not to beat yourself up, but to rather grieve that journey. And I also want you to know, just because you may seek others who've lost a child, your journey is so different. It's so unique. And every relationship, Rob, is so unique. And people call me, and I'm saying this because people call me and they say, Bobbie, do you guys offer a group for those who have lost a child or for those who have experienced a death through suicide? And you know what I have to say is we don't separate those. But the misnomer that I'm concerned about is that you might think that if I get into a group of those who have experienced a suicide or those who have experienced a death of a child is that they know how you feel. But they don't, because it's so unique. One might have lost a child, like one of my clients who was under a car doing some mechanical work, and the car collapsed on their adult child. Another through a miscarriage, another through only through SIDS, a sudden infant death. And so there's so many different situations out there. And your relationship with that person is so unique. No one knows how you feel, but God does. And we can help you with that too.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Bobbie, for being here today. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, thanks for being here as well. And we're back at it. We've been off of Facebook Live for about a year and a half because of COVID, but we're going to start doing this once a week. So please keep coming back. And also, it'll be on demand. So please feel free to share this Facebook Live event on demand with your friends who might need some help and hope, who are dealing with grief and loss. And again, Bobbie, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure, Rob.
All right. And also, for those of you watching, we have more information on our website, theintentionallife.com, today's program highlights page. Just go there and you'll find a link to Bobbie's website where you can learn more about her ministry. Also, our guest today, Mark Negley, we've got a link to his page and where you can learn more about his brand new book. And you can also hear and share today's program on demand. So for the entire Intentional Living team and for Bobbie Rill, for Dr. Randy, I'm producer Rob. I'm not normally here, but, well, I had to be here today. So
well, that's fun, Rob.
Thanks for watching.